They said the air was too thin, the wind too violent, the distance too far for any human hand to bridge. A 4,000-meter shot was not just improbable, it was sacrilege against physics itself. Yet the story survives, whispered in mess halls and buried in after-action reports that no longer exist. A single figure, nameless in official records, known only in fragments. The woman who pulled the trigger when no one believed she could. The SEALs mocked her, laughed at the impossibility, until the silence that followed stretched longer than breath, longer than doubt, longer than the laws of range, tables, and gravity. Because when the target fell, when the mission shifted on the echo of that one impossible shot, nobody laughed again. They buried the paperwork, they erased the name, but they could not kill the moment. It lingers like static on a dead frequency, a shot no one should have made, by someone who should not have existed. And if the legend is true, it did not just change a battle. It fractured the line between human and myth. They speak of it in hushed tones, not in briefings, not in reports, but in the spaces between, when the lights are dim and the silence feels too heavy to ignore. A single shot, fired from nowhere, ending a life at a distance that should have been impossible. There was no warning, no adjustment of wind or scope, only the collapse of a figure so far away that even the sound arrived late, as though reality itself struggled to catch up. And in that moment, something unspoken passed through the men who witnessed it. Disbelief twisted into dread. It wasn't awe, it wasn't respect, it was fear, the kind that lingers, the kind that makes even trained killers feel hunted by something they can't describe. The numbers do not lie, or so they tell us. 2,500 meters. This is the edge of human skill, the threshold where chance and physics take over. Beyond that, the bullet is no longer yours. It belongs to the wind, to the curvature of the earth, to the weight of time itself. Records stand as monuments to the rare men who dared push those boundaries. 4,000 meters doesn't exist, not on paper, not in doctrine, not in science. And yet the whisper of it persists, lodged like shrapnel in the memories of those who cannot forget. Buried in the language of declassified reports is a phrase that doesn't belong in military vocabulary. Classified ballistic anomaly. Not a shot, not a sniper, an anomaly. The shooter's name is missing, erased with deliberate precision, leaving only a void where the record should be. And the void speaks louder than the words ever could. Those who dare to speculate always return to one forbidden detail. She was a woman, a presence not marked on deployment rosters, not captured in official photos, not listed on manifests. To some, she was Canadian, born into the long winters where distance becomes a religion. To others, Eastern European, shaped in shadows, drifting between wars no one admits exist. The specifics change with every telling, but one detail never does. She is always erased, always ghost, and still, the internet remembers what the files forgot. In the corners of Reddit, under layers of irony and mockery, the story takes shape. The ghost sniper. A woman who walked where no records followed, whose existence flickered between rumor and warning. Conflicting descriptions only sharpen the edges of the myth. Some say she was human, some say she was engineered, some whisper she was neither. So the question remains, breathing down the back of every soldier who dares recall that night. Was it human skill, sharpened beyond recognition? Or was it the test of something no one should have touched, a weapon masquerading as a woman, or a woman remade into a weapon? No one answers. No one can. All that remains is the silence of that impossible shot, and the fear that whatever pulled the trigger has never truly left. If the shot had been the end, the story would have dissolved into folklore, a rumor to scare rookies and pass sleepless hours. But legends leave traces, footprints, signatures, shadows on the wall. Her should have been there, burned into the records. Yet what survives is more unsettling than any proof. Entire pages torn from deployment logs, seams where the paper doesn't align, silence where her name should have echoed. The erasure itself becomes evidence. It is too clean, too deliberate, the kind of absence that points more sharply than presence ever could. Requests for truth crawl into dead ends. FOIA releases arrive as corpses of documents. Entire paragraphs struck black, names hollowed out until the page is nothing but ink and emptiness. But one thing slips through a gap. Cross-reference personnel rosters, and the shape of her absence forms clearly. A missing operator, unclaimed, aligning with the night of the impossible shot. Not listed, not reassigned, just gone. Online, the ghosts work quickly. A Wikipedia stub flickers into existence. A line about a female sniper attached to a NATO unit. Hours later it vanishes, Edit history erased as if the thought itself were radioactive. Screenshots circulate for a moment, half-believed, before they too are swallowed by deletions and shadowed accounts. In military culture, women are rarely hidden. They are elevated, paraded as symbols of progress, proof of inclusion. To erase one is not just oversight. It is intentional burial, a scar left in plain sight. The haunting implication threads itself through every scrap of silence. She was not covered up because she was unremarkable, but because she was not supposed to exist at all. And if something can walk through war, pull the impossible trigger, and then be erased so fully that history itself folds around her absence, what does that say about the world we think we know? Or worse, about the weapons we're told we don't have? For a bullet to cross 4,000 meters and still carry death in its teeth, the universe itself must bow in submission. Gravity should drag it down long before. Winds should scatter it, tear its path into useless fragments. Even the curvature of the earth should intervene, tilting the shot into impossibility. Yet something bent, something yielded, and in that yielding, a law was broken. Some call it luck, the convergence of a million fragile variables. But luck does not etch its silence this deep, nor erase its witness from the record. Ballistics experts whisper, reluctantly, that even with the most advanced optics, the shot curves past the threshold of physics. At that distance, calculations collapse into chaos. You don't guide around that far, you pray. And yet this bullet did not wander. It obeyed, as if the air itself had been reprogrammed. Weather reports show winds shifting against expectation, currents bending in ways too precise to dismiss. Almost like the atmosphere had been rewritten for a single moment, for a single path. Dark corners of military forums feed a different fire. References to DARPA's Exacto project. Prototype guided rounds that could twist in flight, following invisible hands through crosswinds and darkness. Officially shelved, quietly forgotten. But soldiers claim they've seen demonstrations. Weapons where the shooter becomes irrelevant, where the bullet chooses its own destiny. Was this one of those? Or was it something darker, something that should never have been tested outside of black budgets and sealed deserts? And then there was the tweet. A seal, anonymous handle, account deleted within hours, for words that outlived their host. It wasn't a rifle. No elaboration, no detail, just the suggestion that what they witnessed was not marksmanship, not even war, but demonstration. If that is true, then the shot was never about the target. It was about us. A signal, etched into physics itself, that the battlefield has shifted beyond humanity's reach. And what haunts is not just the question of who pulled the trigger, but whether it even mattered. Was this the night post-human warfare was born, and no one dared to admit it? Stories do not stay buried in files. They bleed out in whispers, passed over plastic trays and cold coffee at 0200. When the walls are thin and the mind is restless. That's where the legend sharpened. Not about the hit itself, but about what followed. Soldiers speak of 45 seconds of silence that fell like a command, heavier than shock, heavier than awe. No one moved. No one breathed too loud. It wasn't respect. It felt rehearsed, like they had stepped into a script written long before they arrived. Those who were there recall her face, not triumphant, not even present. She didn't celebrate, didn't grin the way adrenaline usually demands. She stood frozen, eyes glassy, as if her body had been left behind while something else stared through it. Some whispered dissociation, the mind escaping to survive what the body just did. Others murmured darker things, that maybe it wasn't her at all, that something foreign had its finger on the trigger. One SEAL, in a moment of weakness and too much bourbon, muttered words that spread like infection. She wasn't shooting at him. She was shooting through him. No one asked what he meant. No one wanted to. Because behind the phrase sits a horror that eats away at the soul. The idea that the target was incidental, that the real purpose of the shot was somewhere else, someone else, watching. And so the story carries not just fear, but guilt. Guilt that they were present. Guilt that they stayed silent. Guilt that they witnessed something not meant to be witnessed and said nothing, because what words could survive it? Every retelling circles back to that silence. Not just a pause after an impossible kill, but a silence that followed them home, lodged in their sleep, clinging to their voices. Because deep down, they know they weren't supposed to see it, and knowing makes them complicit. Static is the last thing truth leaves behind. A hiss on a speaker, a crooked line on a spectrogram, the sound of something trying to speak through a world that refuses to listen. Years after the shot, when the official pages had returned to their blank, bureaucratic, normal, small, stubborn traces began to surface in the places paper could not touch. Forum users pulled down archived mission comms and listened. Between the clipped brevity of radio chatter, between coordinates and status checks, there are bursts, not radio noise, not artillery, but a timbre like a voice, a female timbre that does not belong to any call sign on the roster. The files are corrupted, the packets missing, but the clips that survive play like a ghost. A vowel stretched too long, a consonant that lands where no human mouth should have placed it. Someone at the edge of the net labeled it female vocal tones, and the tag passed quietly from thread to thread, as if the internet itself were trying to remember a name it had been told to forget. Archive.org keeps ghosts we swore away. Scraped pages reveal short, stumbling posts on military blogs, a line or two about the woman with the impossible shot, a casual aside by a user who never posted again. Screenshots circulated for a day, a sentence, then an edit, then the page gone. The Wayback caches show the deletions like tombstones. The posts were small, anonymous confessions. Saw it, didn't understand, can't stop hearing the wind. Each deletion leaves a shape, and the pattern of shapes maps back to the mission date, like a constellation that refuses to be ignored. The legend does odd things when official channels close their mouths. It migrates. It appears in UFO forums where users catalog anomalous aerial events and misaligned timestamps. In paranormal podcasts that treat it like folklore. Even in grief support groups, where veterans caution each other not to speak too loudly about what they saw, because speaking draws attention. In one support thread, a user wrote, "It changed my dreams." The shot rewrites the quiet. The comment had nothing to do with ballistics, but everything to do with consequence. The story is less about distance or rifle model and far more about the way an impossible act reshapes the people who witness it. Corrupted comms, scrubbed posts, deleted edits. The pattern is not random. Static leaks where the state intends silence. And in those leaks the same frayed symbols appear. A code word half remembered, a call sign that returns in different theaters, a photograph with an overexposed corner where a figure once stood. Investigative threads stitch these anomalies together. Their conclusions never satisfy the hunger they ignite. Instead, they leave the listener with damp palms and a tired voice in the chest. If records can be hollowed out so completely, what else can be erased? What else is wearing the veneer of ordinary life, while hiding something the public is never meant to see? Listen again to the clipped archive clips and to the forums where users trade malformed audio files like relics. Hear how the static swells at the edges of speech, as if something resists being recorded. Hear too the human responses, the sudden hush in a mess hall, the dropped sentence, the way a veteran will not meet your eye when you ask about that night. The emotional core of this rumor is not the impossible shot itself, but the slow corrosion afterward. Trust eaten by secrecy, memory eaten by redaction, dignity eaten by silence. And so the question we are left with is not merely who pulled the trigger or what weapon bent physics for a night. The harder, colder question is this: if the impossible happened once and we erased its witness, if static can carry what paper cannot, what else has already been moved out of sight, reclassified, redacted, buried in the hush between broadcasts, waiting until the world is ready to forget it entirely?